Hello, good citizens, and welcome back to the Loyal Sons podcast. We're happy to have you all back with us. Thank you as you all continue to help us grow our listener base. I am the Hoff. I am your host this evening, alongside my compadre, Brett. How are we doing this evening?
Great, man. You know, it's a good day to have a great day, isn't it?
Absolutely. It says that on my shirt right now. It's a good day to have a good day. And what a good weekend we had. And we'll hop into it a little bit more. Before we get rolling, just so I remember to do my business on this, make sure that you're following us on our socials and wherever you can listen to our episodes. We are on Spotify, the Loyal Sons podcast, as well as on YouTube. And follow our socials on X, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Facebook. And it's the Loyal Sons podcast for each of them. As you pull up the platform, what should they do, Brett?
They should smash that like button.
Hell yeah. Like I said, he's not the best color man in the business for nothing. All right, Brett, one hell of a weekend we had, and we'll hop into it. Now, there was a hell of a lot of good football on, and just maybe some heartbreaking results for some very shocking results, and for some really exceeding expectations. With that, before we get into football, we've got some basketball that has started up recently. And shame on us. There's been some games take place that we haven't even discussed, and we're not going to get into them on this episode. But myself, Jared C., and Brett will be diving into these games as football season is winding down. All three schools we cover, Iowa State, Iowa, and Nebraska, all three of their programs, men's and women's teams, are all undefeated right now. Iowa State has the number 16 men's basketball team in the nation and the number 16 women's basketball team in the nation. And the Hawks, their men's basketball team, with a brand new coach that they stole from Drake University, who is just whipping the hell out of those boys, has them at 2-0. Their women's basketball team sitting at number 21. They started off 2-0. And then Nebraska, Hoiberg has the men's team at 3-0, and the women's team is also at 2-0. And that reminds me, when I tell you we are the Loyal Sons, we are the Loyal Sons of the great state of Iowa, the mighty Midwest, the greatest conference in all of college sports, which is the Big 12 Conference, and we cover the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Oh, with that being said, Brett, we're going to hop into the first game of the weekend to cover. We'll go into Iowa, and then we're going to go into the Huskers game, and then we're going to hop into our experience down in Fort Worth and seeing a hell of a game. Now, for all three of these programs, we had last week a two-part episode joined by our friend Mike, where we dove into the Iowa Hawkeyes versus the Oregon Ducks last week, which was a huge game, and then talking about where they were in their trajectory, where Nebraska was and losing Raiola, and then where Iowa State was with the struggles that they had been having and on a 4-game losing streak. So we're going to kick it off with Iowa, because out of all three of these, and I would love to always say that Iowa State has the most meaningful game, but definitely not the case last weekend. Oregon comes into Iowa City, plays Iowa in what is always a tough environment in Kinnick Stadium. And Iowa was sitting right in a great spot where if they could have pulled this win off, they would have been in the running for not likely the Big Ten championship game, but for damn sure a playoff spot if they could finish the season that way. Oregon ends up in a kind of a chaotic game, pulling out the win with a field goal at the end of the game. I couldn't wait to watch this game when we got back from Fort Worth. And there was some things that I noticed that stood out, and it was the fact that I think Iowa was really relying on their defense to make some plays. The problem is in watching this game, Oregon's rushing attack is really what they leaned on to take Iowa down. And it was just consistent running by Noah Whittington for 118 yards, and then Jordan Davison with 52. And then they had Dante Moore. And I was talking with Mike last week, and I asked him, does Moore use his legs? I don't know much about the Oregon Ducks. I've watched him play, but don't study and analyze him. He can use his legs, and he sure did. And Iowa just wasn't able to contain him. You have any thoughts?
The big uglies of Oregon going up against that defense. The defense has been the momentum generator for Iowa, and they gave up zero defensive pressures to the Iowa defense. give them credit.
Right. And I should correct myself. I know, Mike and any other Hawk fans that listen to this are probably going to pull their hair out the minute that they hear this kick off. Now, the defense did their job. They just didn't do enough, much like the offense, to win the game. And what I mean by that is, they didn't get blown out. They didn't allow Oregon to just run through them. However, Iowa made plays. They definitely made plays. Their defensive backs, just looking at the statistics, defensively in their secondary, they did a lot. And they were able to really contain Oregon's passing attack for the most part, or just slow down Oregon's passing attack. They just were not able to capitalize on the opportunities they had. And that was truly the key to the game. And
when the score was 2-0 Oregon, how much of you thought, oh my goodness, this game is going to end 2-0 because Iowa's offense would not be able to do anything and their defense would hold Oregon to 0 points?
I mean, there's always a chance with Iowa and Iowa City. I mean, we've seen some games. It's funny. Mike always refers to the famous game where it was 7-3, I think, 7-3, and the 7 did not come from a touchdown. So it's always possible. I had no service at the game, so my phone was stuck on showing a 2-0 score forever. But in summary, Iowa, as we said, they did have some they did create opportunities. They just didn't capitalize on them. The other, maybe the bigger story of this game was Oregon's defense, which, how wild is it, Brett, now that we are living in a day where Texas Tech and Oregon have strong defenses?
And growing up, I never would have thought it. They were always just fast and threw the ball all over. Who cares how many points the other team scores? We're going to score more.
100%. You go back to the days of Joey Harrington and Mariota and endless other names that were on all of those offenses, and they could just. They were just scoring nonstop, but their defense wasn't stopping anybody. It was the same way for Tech. I mean, shoot, we remember what it was like playing Texas Tech when Patrick Mahomes was there, when Kingsbury, when you've got just endless names there as well. You just planned on being in a shootout, right? Mm-hmm. And in this game, Oregon's defense had a definite game plan to shut down Iowa's run game. And that was another X factor Mike and I talked about last week, was the fact that, and I asked him, I said, do you think that Moulton might be an X factor in this game? Because he is a consistently solid rusher. And there's been some games where, as Gronowski was still kind of getting adjusted and really getting on his feet, Moulton was their go-to, and just kind of, he was your workhorse, right? But they held Moulton to his lowest yards per carry of the season, of 3.8 yards per carry. So the overall summary here defensively for Oregon, they made Iowa, of all teams having to do this, and this puts them in a tough spot, they made Iowa rely on explosive plays to have to move the ball. And in watching this game, were they able to do it consistently? No. But they put Oregon's backs up against the wall a few times because they were able to make it happen, especially at the end of the game when they scored the touchdown to take the lead. But the key drives of the game, man, first quarter safety, that long snapper, that guy had a rough day. Just wasn't good weather up there. Me being a former offensive lineman and struggling to even have a good shotgun snap in some games, I totally understand how this can happen. Long snappers are just a different breed, man, and it is extremely difficult. A lot of people I saw online giving this kid a hard time, and they don't realize, some of them, how difficult that this is, especially in less than ideal conditions. But yeah, a couple times he was off on his snap. This one in particular happened to just kind of go high into the right, well over the punter's head. Punter made a smart move by booting it out of the end zone. But give Oregon the momentum and an early 2-0 lead. And then the other key drive, given their offense, and I don't blame them, you don't want to focus on wasting time. When you've got the ball and you're moving down the field and you have to score to take the lead, I'm talking about Iowa here, you don't stop 30 yards from the end zone and say, you know what, let's slow it down. Let's make sure we use as much time as we can.
Well, and their offense is so inconsistent.
Right.
It's not like the pros where you see them just kind of run it down and then they're like, well, we'll score, or start to try to score with 40 seconds left.
Right. And I mean, let's face it, it sounds like a really stupid way to say it. You don't want to get down there and have them hold you. The last thing you want to have happen is you lose the game because you were 10 yards from the end zone and, it's Iowa starts just running it right down their throats, get it at 4th and goal, and Gronowski makes a hell of a run into the end zone. That was just, my hair stood on end with how loud that stadium got when he ran in. And to see Gronowski, how excited he was, how long it's been since they have had a quarterback that is this passionate and this just tough and, has this much leadership. It was absolutely awesome to see. He was just jacked. And everybody in Kinnick, you could tell, was like, shit, yeah, we got him right where we want him. Because, and we're sitting here talking about giving the Oregon the ball back with just under 2 minutes left. But this is an Oregon team that you've hung with all day. Like, just as Iowa didn't capitalize on opportunities, Oregon also struggled to do that too. And there was no guarantee that they were going to go back to the days of old with Oregon's old habits and go right back to the air raid and just right down the field. Now, Oregon was able to make plays. I got to give it to Moore. That kid is a hell of a quarterback. They were able to get down in field goal range, and, man, I almost shut him down a couple different times in that drive. But, again, you're not getting any pressures on Moore. He's not only using his legs to make time, he's not getting pressure in general. And he was able to kind of pick him apart. They were able to leverage the running game. Either way, they just kind of nickeled and dimed him down the field, and they churned time off. And they got a kicker that was 3 for 3 on field goals. And with one swipe of his right leg, he took the heart and soul out of every fan in Kinnick Stadium. Now, it was hard to watch. It really was, knowing how that feels.
That's the great thing about sports, like the ups and downs. And, you don't know what is going to happen. And just the swings, the highs are highs, the lows are lows.
We continue to show up for it. And we're excited to do it. And we eat, breathe, and sleep it for 4 or 5 months out of the year. And we know it comes with just gut-wrenching, want-to-throw-up losses. And that makes it a hell of a lot of fun. So Oregon walks away with the win. I heard from some fans that were in Iowa City that in most cases, let's face it, Iowa's fans that are usually at the games, they're not the most quiet bunch, and we're not talking about just cheering for the team in the stadium. They also like to voice their frustration and opinions towards you as well, if you're an opposing fan. But walking out of the stadium, multiple encounters said that as they were leaving, it was the most quiet that they have heard their fans leaving the stadium in a while. So I feel for you, Iowa fans. It sucks. This was a situation where you needed this win to keep your playoff hopes alive. Those are most definitely out of the picture after watching the rankings last night. However, Iowa still ranked number 21, so that was good to see. They got to get right back on the horse because it isn't going to get a ton easier this week. They've got USC. But before we move on to what's next week, a Dylan Raiola-less Nebraska Cornhusker football team takes down UCLA. TJ Lateef. It was the late night game on Saturday. And I'm going to be honest, I thought I was going to see kind of a shit show of a Nebraska offense. What I did forget is that Nebraska does not have the same coach. They do not have the same players that were the old teams that used to do this when we're talking like 5-10 years ago. Matt Rule has these guys of a mindset of, you know what, next man up. We've still got the tools we need to win. This TJ Lateef that I've never heard of, he comes in 13 of 15 for 205 yards and three touchdowns. And then you got Emmett Johnson, who is, the second leading rusher in the nation, first in the Big Ten. He carries a majority of the load. He really stepped up this game. 28 carries for almost 130 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, add on to that 3 receptions for 103 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Emmett Johnson himself, he had a total of 231 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that guy, yeah, good.
That's impressive, especially being the number 2 in the nation. And the number 1 guy, I think, is from Jackson State. But he's
number
doing
1 guy for rushing?
Yeah.
I didn't even pay attention to who was number 1.
Yeah, so he's doing that in the Big Ten, like kind of shades of old Wisconsin with Ron Dane and their stable of running backs.
Well, it's shades of old Nebraska. You look at Amon Green, for example, and I mean, we can go through a list of 10 to 12 running backs that were in the 90s and early 2000s that were all amazing rushers. But Huskers defense did step up as well. They brought the pressure. 3 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. Their secondary stepped up. They had a couple deflections. No turnovers forced, or no interceptions forced. They kind of forced UCLA to rely on Nico Ayamayo. I try saying his name.
Call Nico.
Nico, so he had 191 yards through the air and 86 on the ground. And Nico's just kind of known for being a dual. Well, his strengths are as a dual threat. I wouldn't say he's been known for it since this guy's reputation hasn't been the best.
And he flushed that down the toilet.
Him and his pops, man,
yeah. Now there's memes out there where it's like, I'm glad that he gave up, a $40,000 paycheck every week for $80,000.
And to go out there, and they did not start off the season well because we don't need to go through their schedule, but they kind of got embarrassed in their non-con. But Nebraska, this was a much needed win for them. For the guys on that team, they needed to believe that they can win without Dylan Raiola. Let's face it, the transfer portal these days, and Dylan Raiola is a guy that, in high school, before he even got to Nebraska, I think he had committed to at least one other university and flipped it to go to Nebraska, maybe 2. And with this being the case, we don't know if Dylan is a loyal Husker for life or if he's a guy that at the end of the season, he's just like, you know what, I'm going to go, somebody's going to offer me a shit ton of money more than Nebraska, and I'm going to go there. You can see it happening. So,
are there any players that way now?
What? Loyal?
They're going to be loyal to a team. Yeah.
Yeah, there are. There's some in Iowa City. I'll tell you that much. Mike brought up a really good point last week that, don't mean to shift topics here. I mean, we were speaking majority about the offense when we were talking about this, but the differences in that offensive unit as compared to previous years. And there's a lot of chemistry. There's a lot of team feel that wasn't there before versus individuals. And Gronowski's had a lot to do with it, and he's made such a quick impact. Tim Lester came in as well. I think you're going to see a lot more loyalty out of the players in that team. And I'm not going to throw out a biased opinion here, but I am. In Ames, that's what Matty Campbell prides himself on. So Nebraska, I would say, rules the guy to get that done if they're going to build that back up. However, they get a much-needed win, and they're going to a bye week, so Nebraska can rest up. Again, the Hawks got to go out to Los Angeles to take on USC, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the game that we so very much had an amazing experience at, a day of mixed emotions, a roller coaster, if you will, Brett, where we started off the day on a high, and then it got even higher, and then it went down to the darkness, and then it went back even higher than it was before. And that being the TCU Iowa State game down here in Fort Worth. Brett, what were your thoughts on the things that we saw, what we experienced and everything down in Fort Worth that day?
So last week I said the one thing I was looking forward to was the DFW Cyclones tailgate. Mm-hmm. Definitely was not disappointed. Had some of the best barbecue I've had down in Texas. It was amazing. I wish I would have got the company's name because I'd go back there.
Absolutely.
But just the tailgate, the fans walking around giving you Jell-O shots, the Iowa State gear with the Texas flag on the background.
Yeah.
Like, I need to lose some weight so I can actually get a shirt. They didn't have the size for a fat guy.
You and me both.
And then just the setup on it of getting on the bus and they're shuttling you to the stadium, and the Penn State game was going on. And everyone had their phones out watching it. Like, how is Penn State going to beat Indiana?
Right.
And it was just a fun sports atmosphere. And then walking into the stadium, TCU was throwing just giant cocktail parties, all the frats and sororities.
Yeah, walking through tent row.
Had their tents. I was wildly underdressed.
As compared to the TCU fans?
Yes.
I think we all were.
I definitely felt that I was in a TikTok world where I probably could have started a dance and people were like, oh, he's shooting a TikTok. Let's jump along or, dance along with them.
I beg to differ on it with you, buddy. I feel like if they started watching you dance, they might have just called the police.
That's true. That is very true.
We got one. And
then like the crowd was amazing.
They were
friendly. No, like we're both kind of like, no, you're gonna win. No, you're gonna win. Trust me. And then the game itself, like it was such a cool experience.
100% agree with you. I have not made enough trips back to Ames in the last year or so. It used to be I was a season ticket holder for a couple of years. Obviously, I spent a lot of time up there in my 20s, 30s. And then, after being moved back to Texas, 5 years ago, it's been a little tougher to get up there. That's one thing that was awesome to feel was when we were tailgating with the DFW Cyclones, and some of the Iowa Everywhere guys were there too. But you had friends up from Austin, had a friend down from Minnesota who went to Iowa State as well, and just a whole group of us, and had a friend that came in from Arizona as well. It felt like back in the day tailgating in Ames. It really did. Flags flying, everybody's like we get on the bus and everybody's got their phones out watching whatever football game is on. It kind of reminds you of being at being in the lot outside of Jack Trice. So I was making fun of myself. I turned into a grumpy old man. I went to pull down one of the rows in the parking lot, and all the way down the row, it's people with their cornhole, boards and their tailgate setups. I mean, like, well, they're just blocking the traffic. I'm like, this is exactly what Iowa State fans have done in all the paved lots all around Jack Trice for years. And listen to me now being in my 40s going, I can't even pull down the parking lot.
Wasn't I telling you just to drive through it? Like they'll move. Let's embrace being old and just do what we want.
But anyways, at the game, kind of like you said, Brett, it just felt like neither fan base really was going into this game. Well, I shouldn't say. I was about to say neither fan base was going into this game with high expectations. I think TCU, their fans should have had high expectations going into this game. However, I think both fan bases were going into this game thinking we're perfectly capable of blowing this game. I believe our fan base was on a different level when it comes to that, just because of what we had seen in the last 4 weeks.
We knew we could blow it. They were questioning.
Well, we all planned on it. We planned on it. And every podcast you listen to that covers Iowa State, ESPN, Fox Sports, everybody was predicting us to get blown out. Just absolutely demolished. Very few people picked Iowa State to give it a game. And the reason being, and this is very justified, TCU's offense is number 5 in the Big 12, number 2 in passing in the Big 12. They're number 9 nationally in yards per game. We've got a defense that, I mean, for all we knew, before they loaded up the bus to go to the plane and fly down, they walked around campus and said, you all want to play secondary? Because we don't have anybody left. I was planning on seeing guys on that, there's names on the roster for that day that I had never seen before.
I might have been stretching before the game.
Just in case they needed you? Yeah, just in case they needed you. Well, with that being said, they have 2 receivers. That one is 9th nationally in receiving yards. Number 1 in the Big 12. They got another guy that's 11th in the Big 12 in receiving yards. And then their quarterback, who's 10th nationally in passing yards and 5th in the Big 12 now. I believe he was 2nd going into last week. But anyways, all of those factors combined, and a quarterback situation for Iowa State where you don't know what version of Rocco you're getting on a day-to-day basis. And we have the drops on occasion. Nobody was wrong in saying we were going to get beat by 3 to 4 scores. Not at all. Shoot, we were even talking going into the game about, well, if it gets to be halftime and we're getting destroyed, should we go somewhere and catch the Iowa game? But
I like that first quarter, like the drops and everything. And I was like, yeah, we're going to leave at halftime.
But no, the TCU fans, amazing, very friendly. I've been to TCU a couple times for games and never had a bad experience with them. Never once. Do they dress very well for an athletic event or a sporting event? Absolutely. Times are changing. I know Ames is catching up to it. I've seen some fancier attire there in the last couple of games I've gone to. But
some of those poor college guys walking with some of the females and how they're dressed, I was like, I feel sorry for you, guy. Like your life is going to be hell. I wanted to give them hugs.
I feel like opinions vary when we talk about if you should feel sorry for them or shake their hand in some cases. So fan base was very friendly, very welcoming. It was absolutely awesome. However, the strange thing was the fact that At the beginning of the fourth quarter, TCU scores to go up by 11. And within the next 2 minutes of game clock, it felt like about a third of the TCU fans in that stadium filed out, which that can play a factor in close games. Now, we looked around the stadium and I noticed I saw people heading for the exits. I didn't realize how many, but it was incredible. And can't blame them, I guess. Our offense is not known for, at this point right now, we have not shown a strong ability to come back from a deficit, being the fact that we spent an entire half basically down by just a few points to Arizona State and couldn't overcome that at home.
Rocco Beck had 111 yards passing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure they knew they had it in the bag.
It wasn't like we had a Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers out there that was going to be able to drive us down the field with minutes left, right?
Yeah.
Now, with that being said, it's a good segue to hop into the game here because we went a little long on that, but thank you, TCU fans. Y'all were amazing. Last piece of this. I heard rumor that there was a section of Iowa State fans apparently decided to go shirtless as well. And there was one Iowa State sports coverage personality, if you will, Chris Williams, very well known, started Cyclone Fanatic, probably one of the most well-known sport personalities just in regards to sports coverage for the Cyclones that's out there right now in the state of Iowa. And Chris decided he himself was going to join the shirtless wonders on the west, or I should say the southwest, northwest corners. I directionally challenged in that stadium, but in that corner of the stadium. So there's some fun yet incriminating photos that are circulating around with that. But
I am very disappointed that I missed that.
Right.
Because I would have been there.
Oh, yeah. And then we, too, would have been circulating. We would not have looked as good as some of those, some of our fans did as well.
Everyone would have been like, oh, yeah, that's why they don't have your shirt size, Brett.
Oh, yeah. The two guys that live in Texas, they definitely are from Iowa. So hopping into the game, biggest question that comes away from this game that has been asked time and time again is how the hell did Iowa State win this game? And we were asking that ourselves, weren't we, Brett?
Yeah, their defense showed up and did amazing. They got turnovers when they needed. And they were just kind of one of those games where they made the tackle when they need to make the tackle or made the play when they needed to make the play.
I'll say that their tackling was amazing this game, comparative to the previous game. There was a lot of sloppy tackling taking place against Arizona State, but the open field tackles, now granted, there was a few. When you're going up against Eric McAllister or Jordan Dwyer out in the open and you're one-on-one with them, shit, man, like those guys, we saw them get by a few guys as well, open field, in the open field where just flat out missed them. They're just, it's going to happen. But the running game, and again, in the open field one-on-one, we had some guys that were really making plays, breaking down, tackling well. There were some hits, man, that were just, wow. That's the one thing I got to say about the defense. Those boys, they showed up amped up because they were hitting freaking hard. Now, the defense for the day, I would say they were the true definition of a bend, don't break defense. And that's what the 3-3-5 with Haycock is technically supposed to be. They did bend. Hoover did have over 300 yards. He did throw, one touchdown, which we got called for defensive holding on that play. And we won't go too far into this, but one of the worst officiating calls I've ever seen in football, where their receiver was dragging our defender by his face mask and somehow the defender gets called for defensive holding. But
the defender's face mask should not have gotten caught in the guy's hand.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But you move on. That easily could have, that was late in the game. That easily could have just set the tone for the rest of the game. However, McAllister and Dwyer do what they do, and they both have over 100 yards for the game. Dwyer does get one touchdown in the game. I will say I was very impressed, extremely impressed with how well the guys that we had, it wasn't just one or two, it could 3 to 4, ended up stuck on McAllister throughout the game. Anytime they got down inside the 30, I was nervous. Especially we were standing at the back corner of one of the end zones. And there was a couple times I looked at you and said, they're going to run him right to this back corner and try to throw it in there. And they did. They did a lot, which, I can't blame them. There's a lot of vulnerability there in our secondary, and that guy's going to be able to make a play. But they stood up to the challenge, right? They were up to the task. They didn't break. But yeah, TCU's offense was still able to move the ball. However, defense stepped up where they needed it to. The offense, different story, but I will say
for Carson Hansen.
Right. The tone for me was set for the day when we were walking in. We got in after kickoff just because it was kind of a mess trying to get through Tent City out there outside the stadium. So yeah, here we are finding our way to our spot, and there's an interception, which was a little controversial, which we're pretty used to those not going our way, and it did. And then Ben Bramer, the man who some thought had died on the field in Ames in the previous game. I was shocked to even see him on the field. When I looked out and saw a number 18 on the field lining up, I thought, okay, did we give somebody else number 18 while Ben's out? And he makes that amazing catch. And we've had red zone struggles. Well, Ben was like, you know what? Screw this. We just won't stop in the red zone. I'm going to take 4 guys with me and drive the ball to the friggin' goal line. And stretches out and gets that score. And that was really the offensive production for the day, was just grind it out. No finesse, no nothing. We knew that Rocco, he struggled again, 9 completions on the day. With the guy that was supposed to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, like obviously we're in a pickle.
Yeah.
So
how great would it have been after Bramer caught that, fought his way in, scored the touchdown, and he did like the Michael Jackson Thriller zombie walk? That would have been epic.
Because he basically died the week before?
Yeah. I seriously thought he died, and that would have been amazing if he would have done
I didn't think we would see him the rest of the season. Now, granted, they didn't really go into detail about what happened to him in the game. I'm just happy he's okay, but I thought for sure you go down like that and it's something serious, you'll be at least out a couple weeks. But he comes back. We didn't really have anybody on the team that killed it receiving because, there was only 9 completions total, but we had one receiver that got over 30 yards on the day, and that was Sol. But Carson Hansen shows up again, man. Carson has a hell of a day, 108 yards on the ground, 1 touchdown. Little did some of us probably know, he is now the 5th leading rusher in the Big 12, which pretty damn impressive, right?
Especially being out.
Yeah, I believe he's within like 100 or 150 yards of Dickey at Texas Tech, who's leading the conference, and LJ Martin from BYU. But yeah, Carson stepped up. Our offensive line, got to give him credit. They weren't making massive holes for a truck to drive through, but they were making gaps that were big enough to squeak through. But then we look at the thing that some of us bitch about the most, and that was the play calling when it mattered. Right? When that first down was needed, that 4th down towards the end of the game, and we call a timeout, and everybody thinks, okay, well, we're going to punt. And then Matty Campbell sends the offense back out on the field, or Mauser, I should say, Mauser and Matt, send the offense back out on the field, and I think we all went, oh, God, here we go again. Because I'd just been essentially stuffed, right? But if you haven't gone back and watched this on TV, Brett, I'm going to tell you something. I saw something that I can't recall ever seeing this from a Matt Campbell offense before. It wasn't a fake handoff rollout by Rocco. It was a fake pitch to Carson. He literally acted like he was going to toss the ball and did such a fantastic job of tucking it back where the defense couldn't see. There was a defensive end that crashed down. He essentially got through. He was there. All he had to do was look and see Rocco had the ball, and he would have ate him for lunch. And Rocco just ran right by him. And next thing you know, he's in the wide open going down the field. Now, if the man had a little bit quicker legs, might have taken it all the way. But
took it as far as he needed.
He did. Took it as far as he needed. Got us down the field. And this is why we're down by 11 still. Get down the field, and Carson runs it in for his touchdown. And then that was where I think a lot of us were like, well, we've come this far. It was a good journey, right? Let's pack her up and head home. And then we hold TCU to a punt. And I think all of us thought, well, there's no way TCU is going to let us do this again. Well, you know what? Aiden Flora had other plans. And then we see I'm getting goosebumps right now even talking about it. Because we were all standing there going, this is going to be a night of heartbreak. You were saying it.
There was no way they were going to march down the field again and score a touchdown.
And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say there was zero chance of it. The likelihood, very slim. And man, that punt return by Aiden Flora. Now, I will say there was some piss poor tackling on the punt team of TCU, because I think they had 2 or 3 guys that were within arm's length of him in the first 5 yards, after he caught the ball. Flora makes some moves. The next thing you know, he's in the wide open, heading to the promised land. And we're all just man, I don't know if I've felt such a euphoric feeling come through me in an Iowa State game in a while. And we've watched some better teams win bigger games, right?
That was so awesome, especially them like scoring in the end zone we were at. Mm-hmm. It was just amazing. And absolutely, it's our special teams that we've talked about how awful they're so
critical of.
Yep. And I think in the first or second quarter, we punted it and one of our guys was around it, and like, I'm yelling at the top of my lungs to get away from it, like he could hear me.
Right.
And then to have that happen, just
the 2 areas that have been most suspect outside of passing offense have been defensive secondary and special teams. And both of them played a huge role in this win. So that happens. We turned around and looked at some TCU fans around us. They looked just as shocked as we were. Got to give it to them, man. And then defense comes out in the field. I was nervous when we still had time on the clock. You give anything more than 30 seconds to Josh Hoover in those receivers, and a play can be made. And I'll be damned, they held them. And yeah, they walked out victorious. So the Cyclones got to go back to Ames with a win, which was definitely needed. Those boys worked their ass off as critical as our fans are, as we are, as every blowhole in sports media coverage is. But those boys keep fighting, and they pulled it out. Aiden Flora, way to go, buddy. Small town Iowa kid making a play. That's going to be one of those where like you come from small town Iowa football and you dream of those plays, and Aiden Flora gets to live it. So way to go, guys. Way to pull it out. Hell of a night. Hell of a great time again. Thank you to the TCU fans for being so welcoming. Let's look into the rest of the Big 12 here. There were 4 other games that took place. Iowa State, by the way, before we move on, Iowa State gets a bye this week, much needed rest after an emotional win. But earlier that day, there was one of the biggest games, or the biggest game of the Big 12 conference season in Texas Tech, having BYU come to town. But Friday night, we'll start off with one of the sloppiest games I've seen in the last couple of weeks, which was Houston taking down UCF in the bounce house. And a lot of things confused me about this game. We're not going to do an in-depth dive tonight, folks, on all but maybe 1 or 2 of these games. But, in watching this game, Brett, on Friday night, Wigman, and I'm sorry, Houston. I'm very sorry. Because a couple of weeks ago, I made the statement that I was all bought in on Houston. I was on the Houston train. I'm a Connor Wigman believer, and I am. Still, he's a good quarterback, but Connor has another game where he struggles with 3 interceptions. Now, the interesting fact on top of the fact that he threw 3 interceptions is he threw 3 interceptions to the same guy. So the same defensive back for UCF, Philip Dunham, had 3 interceptions in one game. And you sure as hell don't hear about that very often. But the other thing was Scott Frost. I feel like some demons followed him from Lincoln, Nebraska, because he is now under fire again. This game was UCF kind of started out looking like they were going to kick the shit out of Houston. Houston fought back because they should have not been in that situation. And then it kind of went back and forth. And there was a lot of, much like we were talking about in the earlier games or the previous games, there was a lot of ball movement without production in some cases. But the ultimate drive that defined this game, it was the perfect ending to this game. UCF gets the ball with just enough time left to get down the field and down by a field goal. And their starting quarterback playing the entire game. Scott Frost decides to put in the backup for the final drive of the game. No valid reasoning other than he said that their quarterback was struggling. I'm like, well, if your quarterback's struggling so bad, why are y'all in this damn game right now? Now, granted, their defense had made a lot of plays for them, but at the same time, on the final drive of the game, Central, Jared's going to be mad at me. Central drives down the field, and I can't remember the long for their kicker, but if they weren't in field goal range, they were damn close. And they throw this pass to the end zone, which Jake Brennan from Iowa Everywhere, he said it best. If you watch the game back, it's almost hilarious because the guys that are calling the game, they call it like Jalen Hurts just stepped back and threw it downfield, and A.J. Brown has 10 yards on the nearest defender. No, the ball was horribly underthrown. And yeah, the receiver was a couple of yards past the defender, but the defender was the only one that was in a spot to catch the ball. So that's how that game went, Brett. And I did have to check it out because it seems to be that a hot seat kind of follows Scott Frost around anymore. And I don't want to say he's on a hot seat yet, but there is a lot of people are going, what the hell do we have as a head coach?
Yeah, like hopefully he can turn that program and bring him back to some success. Obviously strengthen the Big 12. But Houston, I was also on that bandwagon. I think I predicted them to play Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship game, and they just have disappointed.
Yeah. And I mean, disappointed wouldn't be a word I would use for it, because did anybody really have high expectations for Houston coming into this season?
Not at the start of the season, but when I said they were going to the Big 12 championship game, I did.
Well, yeah, we're both disappointed because we got on the train and we're like,
exactly,
we're going to ride this all the way to Arlington. We were going to buy our Houston shirts and go to the Big 12 championship game and talk about how we've been Cougs fans forever, right?
Yeah, always been a Cougar fan.
Yep, bleed the red and white. But Houston pulls out the win. West Virginia pulls it out against Colorado. West Virginia looking a little bit, I should put it this way. They're in a better light now than they were a few weeks ago. They've been gutting out some wins. Hell, they beat a team that Iowa State couldn't beat. Colorado continues to be an absolute mess. Caden Salter's not even at quarterback anymore. They've got a linebacker that's actually switched to playing running back. It's just chaos out there right now. And in the mad mind of Deion Sanders, I'm sure that there's something behind it, but I don't know what it is.
I'm not seeing it.
No, it's not showing in the results. But West Virginia gets to win. Arizona against Kansas. Arizona, this is a team that could have an eight-win season, which after getting absolutely destroyed in Ames, some didn't think that was going to be possible. But Kansas actually started out the game. They had a pick six. They were already up 17-7. They had a defensive end pick the ball off. Fafita goes to throw. And it's funny, as I'm saying this, I've got the MAC game on here, and literally almost the exact same thing just happened on TV. But he picks the ball off and takes it back to the house. Big man touchdown. I was even stoked watching it. And then it gets called back. There's a flag on the play. And Arizona turns right back around, uses that momentum, goes down, punches in. But what I'm saying is this was the tone of the game. Kansas got up, and could have really just put Arizona in the dirt, and they just continuously shot themselves in the foot for the rest of the game. Arizona, I would say, did not necessarily win this game. Kansas lost this game. They're kind of being who we thought they would be over the last stop of last year. And this year, you never know which Kansas team you're getting. Kansas could be a team that could show up and beat Texas Tech and then turn around and lose to West Virginia the next week. So, but don't need to do much of a dive into that. But congrats to Arizona. They're sitting in a good spot comparatively to where they were a few weeks ago. And then the game that I do want us to talk about, number 7 at the time, Texas Tech, has the Stormin' Mormons, the number 8 BYU Cougars, come to town. And this, for some, ended up being the game they thought it would be. For others, it ended up being completely different. And it ended up being a very much statement win for the Red Raiders out in Lubbock.
I think the biggest statement is for Tech's defense. I thought BYU would be able to run on them. I thought Bear would be able to run and pass on them, and they stopped them.
I mean, look at the stage that was set for this game. Game day's there. You've got Patrick Mahomes as the celebrity picker. They were partying from like Thursday night in Lubbock all the way up until the game. And if you look at these two teams, it blows my mind. I'm not sitting here saying we're the only ones talking about this, Brett, because I'm not going to sit here and say we're two football geniuses here. But you've got the number 1 defense in the Big 12 in Tech. You've got the number 3 defense overall in the nation Texas Tech has. And you've got LJ Martin on the other side for BYU. That's the number 2 running back in the Big 12 and the number 22 rusher overall in the nation. Now on Texas Tech's side of the ball, you've got Dickey, who is the number 1 overall rusher in the Big 12, number 16 in the nation. But to add to that, you've got the number 8 Big 12 rusher backing up Dickey. So you're not getting a break ever on defense. And Texas Tech's offense, with their defense being number 1 conference, number 3 nationally, their offense is number 1 conference and number 8 nationally. Like, more now than ever, people are not of the mindset that this could be a serious playoff contender. And I'm not talking just getting in, but doing something when they get there for the Big 12 and the first one, God, and I don't know how long. If you're not of that mindset now, you better start watching these guys play, because BYU came to town, got the shit kicked out of them, and then walked right back out.
Yeah.
That's all that really took place. Texas Tech did not even let them believe they were in this game. Their defense, 7 pass deflections, an interception. They were shutting down LJ Martin all day. LJ had 35 yards on the ground. Bachmeier's not an easy quarterback to pressure. They were pressuring him all game, 188 passing yards. And Bachmeier only had 12 rushing yards. It's crazy. It's insane,
it's
man.
Bananas, man.
Yeah. Bananas. Bananas.
I ain't no hollerback girl.
It is true. We are no hollerback girls. And Baron Morton continues to be consistent. 17 of 32 for 219 yards and then one touchdown. Dickey and Williams, the Batman and Robin of Texas Tech in the backfield, they remind me of the Gibbs-Montgomery backfield up in Detroit right now. They combined for 149 yards on the ground themselves. So Texas Tech shows everybody, if you stop believing in us after Arizona State, we did what teams should do, and we got our shit together, and we got pissed. And so now here we are.
I think the Arizona State game kind of solidified them.
Woke them up.
A lot of them were first year, and then that gave them the rallying cry of, okay, now let's come together as a team. We're just going to piss pound everyone.
Yep. Well, that's a rundown of the weekend. A lot of celebrations, a lot of broken hearts, a lot of teams' hopes were dashed, fan bases' hopes were dashed, and that's college football for you, folks. That's why we live, eat, and breathe it, and it's such a damn glorious sport. But looking into the Big 12 standings right now, Brett wanted to have a quick conversation with you. We're not going to go past probably the top 4 or 5, but Texas Tech is at 1, and then there's BYU, Cincy, neck and neck tie for 2, and then you got Houston and Utah and Arizona State all sitting there with 2 losses. Now that can all come into play, but let's just focus on the 1-loss teams as we look at these standings. And I just wanted to talk to you in looking at the remaining schedules for both teams. We've got a little bit of a situation on our hands. And the fact that Tech really doesn't have anything left. Now that I say this, watch, they probably shot him in the foot. But
they'll get beat by West Virginia.
I mean, you can't overlook those guys. Scotty Fox, who do I say it?
All he does is win, win, win.
He's the next Baker Mayfield. But no, I mean, Tech's got to go to the bounce house. Then they have West Virginia and Arizona both at home. All very winnable games. I know I just got done talking about how Arizona's looking good, but there's no team in the Big 12 that's looking good enough to have to go to Lubbock right now. Texas Tech, they're in Arlington as far as I'm concerned. Now, BYU and Cincy, different story. BYU has to go to TCU, which, despite what we saw in person last weekend, we have seen what TCU can do and what they're capable of. And that's a game that if Hoover shows up, he's getting the ball downfield to those 2 freaking amazing receivers this weekend, we might have a situation.
I think TCU is going to come to play.
I think they are too.
I think the Iowa State game, they're going to go back and look at that tape and be like, how did we lose this?
Yeah.
And be pissed off. And I think they'll knock off BYU.
It's not that bold of a prediction, because I've heard a few people actually make that pick as well. Now, there's emotions play into this, right? TCU, again, sitting there maybe befuddled and bewildered, as your dad would say, going, what in the hell happened? And then you got BYU, who I think it's a harder recovery for BYU because they went to Lubbock thinking, you know what, we're going to go in here and show everybody that we're the cock of the walk, right? And ended up just getting freaking embarrassed. And I mean, there's no shame in that for any BYU fans that are listening either. Like that's a tall task. They could still be picking themselves up off the ground, but then BYU, get this, sir. The next week they have to go to Cincy.
Well, yeah, that could cause some havoc.
Yeah. And what is your favorite thing in Cincinnati?
With their chili.
Oh yes, their fans all amped up on the chili.
Skyline chili.
The Skyline chili, and it doesn't get any easier. And then, Brett, the Houston Cougars come to Provo. So if BYU, like I said, picked themselves up off the ground and dusted themselves off at this point, they're not getting any breaks to do it. Now, then we move down to Cincinnati. Cincinnati has a very motivated Arizona team right now that they've got to go down to Tucson to play. Don't ever want to overlook those guys. Like I told you, like when we played Arizona weeks ago in the game that brought dark days to our season, it seems, I was very nervous about what Noah Fafita can do and what Ishmael Mahdi can do on that offense. Now, Cincinnati's got Zona down in Tucson, and then they have to go to BYU. So this game, not this week, but the following week, is going to be a hell of a game as far as who goes to Arlington. Now, on top of that, for Cincinnati, just much like BYU, it doesn't get any easier. Cincinnati has to go to Fort Worth and play TCU. And let's keep in mind that TCU, until the final buzzer last weekend, TCU is a team that believed we've got a shot. So they're talented enough to be a team that was right there in it. Now, it's just, to me, it's almost comical to see Texas Tech, what they have left. Texas Tech has had multiple people step up and say, you know what, we can take down the king and show people that you're a paper tagger. And outside of Arizona State tripping them up, many have tried. Many have left very beat up and bloody. And now they have 3 games the rest of the season. It's funny, we just talked about Arizona, and when we're talking about Texas Tech, we're like, Texas Tech should be able to take that game pretty easy. And then we talk about them playing Cincinnati, and we're like, that's a tough one. But yeah, for BYU and Cincinnati, tough road over the next 3 weeks. It'll be interesting to see how it goes for them. So then we got Houston sitting here with 2 losses. Houston has a bye this week, and then they've got TCU and Baylor. Again, not an easy game.
No, at Baylor, too.
At Baylor, right? And you've got the number 1 passer in the Big 12, or nationally, in Robertson. And then you got Utah sitting right there, who they have to go to Baylor this weekend. Then they have Kansas State and Kansas, which Utah, for them, that's comparatively to the previous 3 teams we just talked about, that's the easiest of the 4. Arizona State, maybe they're beat up. They've had a tougher go than they wanted to this season, but they've got West Virginia. Then they got to go to Boulder, and then they have Arizona. We don't need to go any further than that. That's the end of the 2 lost teams. But the only reason I went through the 2 lost teams is the fact that the 2 remaining 1 lost teams outside of Tech, dude, like it's no guarantee they might lose 1, but there's a possibility they could lose more than 1. And the next thing, we've got 5 or 6 teams sitting here with 2 losses.
I could see BYU losing 3 games and going 5-4 and
just being down in the dumps and not being able to pick themselves up.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and say any team can watch the game film from last weekend and study that and say, oh, well, Tech did that. That's what we need to do. Not any team in the Big 12. I'm sorry, folks. I don't care what fan base you're rooting for. No other team in the Big 12 defensively can do what Texas Tech can do. There's a fact. They're one of the best teams combined on offense and defense that we have seen in the Big 12 in a very long time. So, yeah, you can't watch that game and say, well, that's all we need to do. BYU is very capable of winning all 3. They are very capable of losing all 3. Cincinnati, very capable of winning all 3. Also very capable of losing all 3. Cincinnati, I believe at this point, in my opinion, still has what is maybe the best quarterback in the conference. Houston, very capable of winning all 3 as well. Utah, very, very capable of winning all 3. And then Arizona, who knows? With Arizona State. Yeah. Who knows? Just even bringing Arizona State's name up just hurts. It hurts so bad. Anyways, that's the pickle we're in, folks. It's going to be a hell of a finish to the end of the season. Congrats to the Big 12 and having 4 teams in the top 25 of the CFP rankings. We're not going through the Big 10 standings because of the fact that with Iowa really out of any shot of the playoff right now, and there's 2 teams that nobody's going to beat in that conference that are going to be in Indianapolis, and that's Indiana and Ohio State. So there's a few teams that have playoff contention, but the rest of them, they're just looking at what bowl we're going to. Time to party, folks.
Yeah.
The Big 10 looking very strong right now. 6 teams in the top 25. And Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon moved up to 8. USC at 17. Michigan at 18. And then Iowa hanging in there at 21. I was glad to see that their loss did not drop them out or something just insane by the CFP. So, all right. Looking at this upcoming weekend, Brett, we're going to kick it off with the Herky and Herbie corner games. So Nebraska on bye, again, much needed after a great win that they needed over UCLA. Now, number 21, Iowa, sitting at 4-2 in the Big Ten, has to go to Los Angeles and play number 17, USC, who is 5-1 in the Big Ten, and sitting there right now hoping that they can win out and that somebody can trip up either one of the two title contenders, which are Ohio State and Indiana. And then they can be sitting there in a spot to, maybe get in off a tiebreaker, God knows what, which I don't see happening since Ohio State and Indiana are basically just rolling over everybody they play outside of this last weekend, put an asterisk next to that one. But anyways, USC is a 6.5 point favorite coming into this game. It's a Big Ten Network at 2:30 p.m. on Saturday. How do you think Iowa comes into this?
Like Iowa always does, focused on defense. They're going up against a pretty high-powered offense. And I think Iowa goes in there. They show them what defense is. It's a 2:30 kickoff, so that's early West Coast time. Mm-hmm. Like, they'll still be drying off from their surfing and California burritos. And I think Iowa beats them.
Yeah, all the celebrities will just be getting done with their champagne brunches.
Yeah.
Will Ferrell and Snoop Dogg and everybody else making their way to the game. Now, if Mike were joining us this week, Mike would send a big thank you to you because you said something that we were kind of talking about last week. And they go there and they show them Iowa just stays who Iowa is. They go in with the same game plan, right? Kirk Ferentz was actually in an interview this week, and they were talking to him about their game plan going out to Los Angeles. And he said it in a different way. I'm not going to quote him word for word, but he essentially said, we're going out there and doing what we do. USC is the team that's going to need to adjust. Now, with that, and why I said that Mike would have been super happy to hear your response, is the fact that USC played Nebraska, and not too long ago. Nebraska should have won that game. But the fact is, USC should have blown out Nebraska in that game because there was a lot of the factors that impacted the outcome of that game. But USC, for being this high-powered passing offense that for a lot of weeks this season was very highly touted, their receivers couldn't catch shit. And, the quarterback, Jordan Mailata. What is it with these Big Ten quarterbacks out in the West Coast? Jaden Mailata. These freaking West Coast Big Ten quarterbacks or offenses and having to have their hard to pronounce names. A guy that lacks intelligence like me, you can't have me talking about these guys. Anyways, Jaden Mailata, who is able to scramble around, make plays on it. Nebraska did a good job of really getting in his head. And, he was looking downfield and he was making plays, but when he would get him to his receivers, these are damn good receivers statistically. And they just looked befuddled when a ball would get to them a lot of times. So the reason I'm bringing that up is I would say Nebraska's defense is not as good as Iowa's. This is just my own opinion. And with that being said, I think that Iowa and that defense who kept them in a game against Indiana, before that, kept them in a game against Iowa State. That was the previous version of Iowa State. And then kept them in a game against Oregon. And USC, as far as I'm concerned, USC's no Oregon and they're no Indiana. And I think Iowa can win this game.
Yeah.
Does it put them in
jinxed them because we both picked them.
Does that put them in a better spot?
No.
For a playoff contention? Yes. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of factors. There are a lot of things, a lot of dominoes would have to fall. But it does keep their hopes alive a little bit. But, yeah, I feel like Iowa can take this game. And we can move on. 2:30 p.m. kickoff again on Saturday. You heard it here, folks. Brett and the Hoff both riding high on the Hawks in this game.
Hawks defense.
Yeah. Don't shit the bed, Kirk. All right. So going into the Big 12, somebody's going to have to trip up somewhere, and it starts this weekend. Arizona goes to Cincy. Arizona could beat Cincy. Cincy is a 6.5 point favorite right now. My worry for Arizona is and this is a worry for both teams, depending on how you're looking at this. Arizona has no pressure. Cincinnati, for the first time since their playoff run with a previous coach and, some years of struggle between then and now, is sitting in a spot where, you know what? If we lose, it's over. And they've got that pressure. They just got back into the rankings at 25, and that plays a factor. players and coaches hate to hear it, and they'll give you a whole line of bullshit that says, nope, we're not looking past this week. You're telling me 100 guys on a football team, there ain't one of them that's looking past that week. They're feeling the pressure right now. And regardless of what they say, this is an added stress for them. Cincinnati is perfectly capable of absolutely throttling Arizona. With their running game and Sorsby's ability to scramble around and make plays, this could be an absolute blowout. And, since he could win it by 2 or 3 scores.
It's going to be 50s, 60s degrees. I know it's cooling down in Arizona, but that's still cold. The Cincinnati Bearcats are going to be all hyped up on Skyline chili, carb-loaded with the spaghetti. And I think they're going to blow Arizona out.
I agree. And Cincinnati is also coming off a rest week. So they're going to be rested up. Arizona just came off of, as messy as that game was, it was a long, brutal game versus Kansas. So I'm going to say Cincy wins by 17 points and keeps their run alive right now for that number 2 spot in Arlington. That's at 11 a.m. on Fox, by the way. Then we move on to, we don't need to spend any time here.
How do you not want to drive up there and go to that game just to be in the crowd waving the shirts around?
Listen, we're going to the Geyer game on Friday night. I don't want to wake up early to drive 4.5 hours up to Stillwater for this game. It's an 11 a.m. kickoff. No, not going.
Road trip?
Got things to do. But the Wildcats are coming down to Stillwater. You got a team in Stillwater that's 0-6 in the Big 12. They've accepted their fate. Their fans have accepted their fate. God bless you, Oklahoma State fans. And I don't say that in the weird way that native Texans say it. Truly proud of y'all for what you've done this year and bringing spirit, passion, and enthusiasm to Stillwater in your games with nothing really.
Passion is why I'm trying to talk Hoff into road tripping up there this Saturday.
I'm spirited and passionate out after last weekend. We'll talk offline, but there is another game in a few weeks that I was going to see that is not a Big 12 game I was going to talk to you about. Maybe your interest. However, I think K-State goes down there, and God, do we even want to try and predict this one?
No.
K-State coming off of
spreads 20.5.
K-State's coming off a bye. They're angry and hyped up, angry about the season, hyped up because they just kicked the shit out of their in-state rival a few weeks ago. It's going to be a 28-point win or more. And it's a 20.5-point spread, and I think they are most likely going to cover that, and then some. And West Virginia has to go to Tempe, take on the Sun Devils. So the Sun Devils sitting in a spot where they had hope, and then they didn't have hope, and now we're back to hope and hoping for a miracle. But the one thing they absolutely cannot happen is they can't slip up. And West Virginia has proven to everybody now that they are not a team to be overlooked. Arizona State sitting there with 2 losses. This is 12 p.m. on TNT. So very much a fan of TNT, by the way. But Arizona State is an 11.5-point favorite in this game.
I think Arizona State pulls it out. Their coach is too good to miss this opportunity. Because we're talking, you could see BYU with 4 losses. They're still in it. And they just need to capitalize on the madness of these last couple of weeks.
I think the news is out on West Virginia. It's always fun to be that team that everybody thought was dead, and you rise up from the ashes, and you have a couple of upsets, and next thing you know, you're riding high. Kind of like
it was always fun as an Iowa State fan.
It's kind of what Kansas did last year, right? They rose up out of nowhere and took down the top 3 teams in the conference, and then they just turned around and a game at the end that did not go well for them. It's fun while it lasts, but I think the news is out. Now, before we move on from this really quick, with the CFP rankings coming out, little old West Virginia, one of the bottom teams in our conference, when we're talking about comparison between conferences, knocked off Pittsburgh earlier this year. And Pittsburgh is not only ranked, but they're in contention for a playoff spot, and they're in the tie right now for the conference title game in the ACC. I posted this on X last night to some West Virginia fans. If you have anybody, with y'all being over near the East Coast, if you have anybody that's an ACC fan around you talking about their conference over yours, just remind them of where you are right now ranked in your conference versus one of their top title contenders and what you did to them. Moving on, Central comes to Lubbock.
Not going to end well.
As we just talked about, a lot of questionable calls, a lot of just sloppy play, losing a game they should have won. Anytime one guy on your team has 3 interceptions, you should damn well win the game. Texas Tech is a 23.5-point favorite. How pissed are you going to be if freaking Central somehow figures out a way to get it done and just screws up everything? It ain't going to happen. Anything's possible, right?
Yeah, they just need to go in there and try not to get hurt.
Yeah. So, no, I think that Texas Tech is definitely going to cover this. I feel like Texas Tech is getting to that point where Joey McGuire is saying, let's get up by a couple scores and let's start putting the second, third strings in, because they're now looking towards what the rest of the season has in store for them. And UCF or Central, they've only won one Big 12 game. I don't think they're getting their second in Lubbock. Now, the last 2 games, number 13, Utah, is going to Waco. All right. So Utah with a 4-2 conference record right now. And now they're needing some dominoes to fall for them. But you got Baylor, who by many folks was picked as should be going to Arlington at the beginning of the season. Right? Maybe the best quarterback in the Big 12. Going to have the strongest offense in the Big 12 in some cases. Defense, it's just Baylor. Nobody knows what they're going to have on defense. And then you got Dave Aranda, who started the season on the hot seat. But Baylor's not where they wanted to be. And then you got Utah coming into town with that added pressure on them. Again, you can't slip up. We see teams tighten up when this happens. Utah's an 8. This kind of shocks me. 8.5-point favorite going into Waco.
I think it'll be closer than that.
I think it will be.
It's going to be a late game. All the crazies in Waco will be out. Like
crazies in Waco.
Oh wait, I shouldn't say that. There's no one crazy in Waco, Texas.
No, never.
But they'll be out there. They're going to do that whole student run across the field and get into their student section. And I think their defense will show up and kind of play what you always see Baylor do.
The run onto the field has never done anything for me as far as I mean, I get it. Everybody has their tradition, but they're all wearing their yellow shirts and they all run on the field. It's like, okay, get off the field. Let's play the game.
Yeah,
I think Baylor is. I would love to say that Baylor can pull this off, but I've put my faith in Baylor in a couple of games this season where they really let me down. That one of them being the Auburn game. I think Utah. I think their offense and their defense have kind of got things together. I think Dampier is going to have a day. I think Utah might even cover this spread. So I could see a 10-point win or more. But based on my picks for the season, this will probably go the opposite way. Last game, Brett. TCU now sitting at 3-3 in the conference has to go to Provo.
I really want to see TCU rally and look at that tape and say, hey, we lost that game against Iowa State and beat BYU. I think they will, but I think it'll be a last possession type game, and that's how they win it.
TCU can do this. Now, what TCU is going to have to do is be able to run the ball, because they allowed an Iowa State defense that is very suspect to the run to slow them down, which TCU's running game is nothing to write home about. But at the same time, you're going to have it, because BYU's defense were not capable of shutting down Texas Tech's passing offense. But if Iowa State's depleted secondary could keep us in a game against their passing attack at TCU, BYU's secondary sure as hell can. So they're going to have to rely on another factor. Now, the other aspect is Hoover's just flat out going to have to make some plays. And he had, I'm not trying to take us back to last weekend, but he had wide open guys throughout that game that he was not seeing. Because there was multiple times where he would drop back to pass, and I thought we were screwed. McAllister was wide open 2 or 3 times. He didn't even throw the ball his way. So Hoover's going to have to make sure he's going through his checkdowns, not just eyeballing 1 or 2 receivers, but he's going to have to make sure he scans the field. God, Brett, this is a tough one. Man, I'm going to say BYU wins, but they don't cover. I feel so bad for any fans that are in Provo at this game if BYU loses this game, because they just went and got their, knocked in the dirt in Lubbock, and then they come home, and then an unranked TCU team comes in and beats them. Oh, God, dude, yeah. It just sounds, the pain. God, love the Big 12. All right, well, that's a rundown for the week. One final question for you, Brett. What was one thing that took place in sports, but mainly college football, or just football in general throughout this last week, doesn't have to be specifically NFL or college, that was a shining moment for you? We look at a lot of negative things when we look at sports. Which team didn't perform? Which player didn't do this? What was something you saw this week that gave you this inspiration, lifted you up, kind of lifted your spirits?
It's got to be the punt return, because I'm a Packer fan, and unfortunately I didn't get to watch that game because of the whole YouTube thing. But it had to be the punt return. Like, that was so exciting, so cool, and just the camaraderie of the Iowa State fans that were there and all gathering as the TCU fans walked out.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that is a good one. Like I said, small town Iowa kid getting to make the play of his dreams. I have two really quick. One, we witnessed both of these in person, but things that lifted me up a bit. We were on the bus ride back from the stadium to the lot to get a car. And Iowa State fans, we pride ourselves on being one of the most likable fan bases in the entire Big 12. Shit, some of us say in college football. And you know what? If you ask other fan bases, a lot of them would say the same. And that is something I am damn proud of, and that we all should be. I saw something that was so disgusting and so despicable on that bus ride. And every fan base, regardless of how great you are, you could have 60,000 Tim Tebows at a game in your fan base, and one of them is going to be a turd. And we had that guy on our bus. Now, on this bus ride, there was a family of TCU fans that got on. And what this dipshit didn't realize is that this bus didn't just go straight to our lot. It had one more stop where it let other people off. Apparently, he thought that this family got on and made some special request for the bus to stop, make an unscheduled pit stop on the way to our lot. And as these TCU fans are getting up, not one word has been said by them. You know, everybody's just talking amongst themselves. This asshole clearly said he was, 73? Sitting there with his significant other. And I hope to God somebody hears this and they're like, we know who that guy is. And he listens to it, because I'll talk to him in person. Probably do more than that. Anyways, he starts yelling at him. Yeah, just like the losers, your football team. He was using some vulgar language. I'm not going to say it, but telling him, get off the bus. You're pathetic. You should be ashamed of yourselves. You're entitled. And he's calling him everything in the book. Multiple Iowa State fans spoke up and started. Now, did any of them intervene or anything? There was really so much you can do sitting on a bus, but spoke up and told him, knock it off. I even turned around and said, like, what the hell are you mad about? But then another TCU fan that remained on the bus continued to get into it with this guy. And I was proud to see some folks speak up. I was not proud of the fact that guy was wearing an Iowa State jersey sitting there doing that, because he was yelling things at those kids. And you saw it too, right? Anyways, moving on from that, more positive note, Ben Bramer was my shining light. For one, we didn't even know the guy was going to play. We thought he was maybe dead, and then he wasn't. It's one of those situations where, like, much like DeMar Hamlin, kind of like, maybe he's just done for a while. He comes out, not only does he play, but he scores a touchdown that had a very big impact on the final score of this game. And it just goes back to, you know what, just a friggin' tough kid. Proud as hell that he's on our football team. The entire team, just very inspiring. Great job this weekend. That was my shining light. But anyways, thank you for giving us a listen. Thank you for continuing to listen to our shows and increasing our listener base. And that's it for us tonight. Brett, any final closing thoughts?
All I've got to say is like what Pink says. Raise your glass if you're wrong in all the right places.
Pink said that, eh? That's good.
So I raise my glass a lot because I'm wrong.
Oh, well, that's, you got to find a way to raise your glass, though, right?
Yep.
And it's win or lose, we booze. All right, we're going to call it a night. Iowa State fans, enjoy your week off. Nice stress-free weekend. Nebraska fans, you as well. And for the Hawkeye fans, good luck out in Los Angeles. Hope they pull it off. And that's us signing off. We are the Loyal Sons, folks. Have a cold bush light on us. And again, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.